Welcome to Burning the Couch, a podcast where we pull back the curtain on systemic abuse. And you're here with Brooke and Diana. And today's episode is a very special one. And while Diana and I have been covering a lot about, in the beginning, domestic violence, our personal connection and stories, and now have expanded it to our broader systems like our government. How does religion impact how we view the world, our relationships, family systems, mental health system, all of that? We have an incredible, our very first guest today. And I'm just incredibly excited. I just even let the intro in half. I am that excited. So before we introduce her, Diana, hi. How are you?
Hello.
How's it going?
Uh, I'm good. I'm hanging in there. Life be life, but I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited for this episode and to have our first guest ever. It's just very cool, and I'm just super excited.
I know we've been fangirling for the last couple of weeks, and now I think Santa, I guess, if you're celebrating Christmas, is coming a little early. So, without further ado, I want to introduce her. So, officially, we are here with our special guest, Nikki McCarty, a queer, neurodivergent, disabled, childless cat lady. Welcome, Nikki. Oh my gosh, what an
Hi.
honor. Hi. How are you doing? How are you feeling about recording today?
Um, Good. Nervous. Very, very nervous. I've never done anything like this before.
Uh-huh.
So this is definitely a new experience for
Mm.
me.
And I'll explain to our listeners how did we get here. One, I hope being your very first podcast. It's again such an honor, but we are going to talk about a heavy topic today, a couple different ones that intersect. But first, I'll introduce how we met. And so, honestly, Nikki and I met online about a month ago. Had a couple posts that went accidentally viral. It was not my intention to reach hundreds of thousands of people, millions of views, but my posts were on what's currently going on in our country here in the US with the systemic abuse, authoritarian systems and governments, cult mentality, estrangement from family. Since I've been pretty vulnerable on here for the last year or so about surviving domestic violence in my marriage, but also some pretty gnarly levels of gaslighting and abuse within my own family, being cut off from the family back in 2020 for posting Black Lives Matter content. And, anyways, long story short, it's been such a blessing in being able to meet really cool, awesome, caring people online. And Nikki was one of them. And we've been chatting and figured that her story was pretty profound and wanted to give her some space to really empower her voice and talk about what she's survived. And I don't know, just there's so many beautiful things about Nikki. I could go on and on and on for hours. But anywho, I guess I will turn the mic over to Nikki. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are, your backstory?
Absolutely. Well, going back to how we got introduced, I saw your post, a series of posts that were related to authoritarian systems, cult ideology, and it just resonated so much with me. And so I just sent you a message saying what you're doing matters because there are so many people that they may be isolated, they may be feeling alone, thinking that gaslighting themselves, thinking like, am I going crazy? Am I the only one noticing these patterns playing out on this larger scale that I've also experienced at this smaller personal scale? And so, like, making that connection, reached out to you and just let you know you were making a difference. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. So thank you for the content that you create and being so open with your story and conveying it in a way that so many people can access.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much again for your kind words and the support. It was an overwhelming in a really positive way time. And I'm just thankful that it's landing well for others. And I know that we'll talk further in the podcast that estrangement specifically is not easy. This isn't my post or like this podcast to shame anyone or get back at anyone or be mean about it, it's devastating for anyone to go through. And I just thought, you know what? I've been open about all of the abuse in my marriage and it's helped maybe specifically romantic relationships. But I believe that estrangement is a much larger phenomenon that has gone on, or people are fearful of it in the last, I would say, 5 years up to now. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would love to hear though, Nikki, and Diana would too, just how give us some of your backstory, because I know that this is open ended, but want to fill in the listeners just like where you come from, who you are, how do these patterns overlap for you?
So I am related to JD Vance. I technically he's my cousin, but it's step cousin. So we're related by marriage. His half siblings are my full blooded cousins. I don't know what the right terminology for that is. So his stepmom is my biological aunt. So that's how we're related. First, I was just simplifying it and saying he's my cousin, 'cause that's how we had always referred to him. But some people were upset with me saying that I was his cousin. So I have to give some clarifiers on exactly how we're related. And then listeners can decide if they see that as a family relationship. So I was actually raised by his biological father from the time I was 14. Biological father and his stepmom, so my aunt, they took me in after my dad died. And his dad was essentially a father figure to me. His dad walked me down the aisle at my wedding. He taught me how to drive. Really, all of those key moments that your dad would play for you as a teenage girl, that's what JD's dad did for me. So, but JD and I aren't emotionally close because he wasn't really involved with our side of the family until after I turned 18 and went to college. So we orbited around the same father figure, just at different times. And then JD started reconnecting with the family around the time that I started pulling away.
Gotcha. No, thank you for giving us that backstory. And wow, going back to his father doing a lot of those, like you said, fatherly, really emotional, special roles. And I'm really grateful for you for having that after such a devastating time in your life. I think blood or not, I always say family is family. But again, that is up to the listeners to decide. I know that a big piece of today's show, in conjunction to your history and background, Nikki, and growing up with the broad theme of how systems are abusive, and especially under our authoritarian government and with church, all the way down to our families. And of course, that can impact us at an individual level profoundly. So, we're going to talk about all those themes today and your experience growing up in your family. So, I'll turn the mic over to Diana on this one.
So, when we talked before starting this podcast, Nikki, you mentioned that you grew up under Christian nationalism, and you also mentioned the Seven Mountain Mandate. And I was just curious if you could tell us about your story and how your take on religion impacted your worldview.
Absolutely. I grew up in an evangelical Christian home. I lived with my grandparents until I was 5, and that was a really positive experience. And so, associating faith with a sense of security and a sense of safety and love was, I think, something that brought comfort to me as a child. And so I still look back on those memories and I have these positive memories tied in, which is why the current state of things is so conflicted. But it was that normal Sunday school and vacation Bible school, and your prayers before bed. Now I lay me down to sleep. All of those core memories were positive ones. And so as I got a little older, me and my dad and he remarried and we moved out and we started going to a church that was still evangelical, was still affiliated with this Seven Mountain Mandate ideology that I'll get into, but they very much focused on end times theology, and my dad got very into that. And so I remember him reading Revelation and talking about how it was literal and very focused on the rapture theology. But what the Seven Mountain Mandate is it's this ideology that started back in the 70s. And it started to get popular again around the Y2K era where the Left Behind books came out. And so evangelical kids from 90s, 2000s, we all, I think, have this shared collective trauma from the Left Behind books. But the Seven Mountain Mandate is this form of dominionism ideology. So dominionism is the belief that man has dominion over the earth and everything in it, plants, animals, resources, land. And so it's the Seven Mountain Mandate is a type of cultural dominionism. And that's where Christians are called to rule over seven mountains or spheres of influence. So those seven spheres are family, education, media, entertainment, religion, government, and business. And so that is Christian nationalism. That's a core part of Christian nationalist mindset is that Christians are supposed to take over in these areas, basically all of the spheres of life that connect people.
Oh, I've grown up around, as we talked, a bunch of different religions, but this, thank you for explaining it, where I think it highlights what's going on right now.
It's really strange to see it playing out on such a broad scale because when ProPublica showed the leaked 2025 training videos, I wasn't surprised at all. And I remember people talking about how it was such a shock. And I was like, this kind of sounds like what we learned in Sunday school. How is anyone surprised? And I realized that maybe that isn't the norm in other churches or other denominations, is that you aren't taught from a young age that Christians are supposed to gain control over all these parts of life. So
They know that there's a big connection between control, very abusive, authoritarian. It comes down to families, relationships, and religions and families. All of these systems can operate like cults. And I know we talked a lot about we both appreciate the fight model from Steve Hassan, and you can't, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I know that was one of the posts I posted about previously on my page, but I'm just curious, how has religion, I guess, shaped your relationships, or how they, even growing up, what did that look like? But also not just relationships to others, but what about yourself and your identity and emotions? Because Diane and I previously did a whole podcast on being in some, especially religious communities that are heavily associated with MAGA, but we weren't in this level of high control religion. So yeah, Nikki, how has all of this impacted you and your relationships?
I think with my relationships, so we have, I was talking about the rapture and our rapture theology earlier, and we were taught that Jesus was coming back any day. And we literally had to be ready, and we would hear this trumpet blowing, and then we would get called up to heaven. And then all of the sinners and non-believers would be left behind to suffer for 7 years of horrible tribulations, of fires and famines and floods and wars and just absolute suffering. And then the believers who were taken up by Jesus would return to the earth for 1,000 years, and then there would be a battle between God and Satan, and then we would live forever in eternal paradise. And so having that mindset as a child and thinking like, oh, well, my friends aren't going to church with me, or my friends don't believe the same thing as me, they must be going to hell. And then you have this pressure to witness to them and try to save them. It definitely influences your relationships, I think, because you have this goal of saving them, but also you kind of think of them as like destined for hell. And so that even as a kid, as a teenager, I think that kind of like impacted some of my friendships. And instead of just being present in the moment, I always had this thing in the back of my mind, are my friends going to hell, or am I going to hell? We didn't have, even for me, we didn't have that the once saved, always saved doctrine that some denominations do. And so, literally, if we gave our life to the Lord, but we sinned and then we got hit by a bus, then get out of luck, you're going to hell. And so, that definitely plays into how you see yourself and relationships, and you're always vigilant.
Wow, I couldn't imagine. Just so much stress and pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were taught that there was spiritual warfare. So we believed that there were demons all around us all the time. And there were angels and demons fighting on our behalf around us all the time. And they would use the scripture of angels encamp around you, but the enemy is out to steal, kill, and destroy, and different verses that suggest that there's some unseen world that is basically, if we sin and we have our hearts open to sin, then demons can get in and destroy us. And so I was always praying and checking and rechecking to see if my heart was right enough to get into heaven so I wouldn't be separated from my family in the afterlife.
Wow. I just wanted to just take a moment and just be like, that is so intense. And just, yeah, like being honest, my heart aches for you, especially your younger self. That just feels like an immense amount of pressure. I know I have an experience with Mormonism, but not anywhere near this intense. And that kind of, I kind of described it as like a big brother feeling where it's like someone's always watching. And I just, wow, I'm almost speechless just how intense that is.
It is definitely like a big brother type feeling. And I think it's so funny because you said that you grew up in Mormonism, and we were taught that like Mormonism was so extreme, and that every other religion that wasn't ours, even denominations that were different from ours, were like misguided, and that they were too strict or legalistic. Since we were allowed to wear pants and wear makeup and go to the movies and stuff, like we had freedom. And so we had so much more freedom than the other religions and denominations. And so hearing you say I grew up in Mormonism, but this is far out. It's like so validating. So thank you.
And just briefly, like, have a little brief stint interacting with Mennonite and Amish communities. And the psychological piece of this, of the fear, no, I don't recall like at all it being this extreme, to be honest. This is my jaw's on the floor.
And that's the thing, is we were expected to not be afraid at all, because they would use scripture and say, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power and joy and a sound mind. I
Jeez.
remember the scripture off the top of my head. I know I'm saying it wrong, but that's bad because I went to Bible school. But
You probably
yeah,
disassociated from it all. And I'm just like, I guess the parallel, going to bring in different parallels to different systems. I'm thinking of my marriage and that big brother feeling where my ex put cameras in about every single room in our house beside bathrooms. And I didn't even realize until escaping and taking those damn cameras down after he got evicted, how just, yeah, hyper vigilant I was. And it wasn't just even in my own home, it was everywhere I went. So I can't imagine you growing up in this at such a deeper subconscious, unconscious level, because it's so normalized, right? Like a religion, your worldview versus a literal camera. They both are very extreme, but I just, yeah, from childhood and on, that becomes your norm.
and with being observed like that and not having privacy, I think that something that it's not in all families, but it's something that is common, I think maybe more common in religious families. I'm not sure, but this pressure of that parents have to make sure their children are on the straight and narrow so that they don't go to hell, because, this, obviously I'm not a parent, but I can imagine if you grow up in that you would have this overwhelming pressure to make sure that your child is safe from hell, if you believe that they can go to hell just for any
Mhm.
any sin.
Wow. Like I know it's intense, especially when you have like your wider church setting and kind of all of the kind of control is reinforced. But I'm also curious about at home what that looked like, because I'm guessing that was probably intense too.
So, before I moved in with my aunt and uncle, I lived with my dad and his wife. And I started out with these really unhealthy boundaries that I just wasn't taught boundaries, or it wasn't like modeled for me. So I was conditioned to not notice when my boundaries were being violated. And so I think in these systems, we have this framework of monitoring or policing each other under this guise of accountability. We're supposed to hold each other accountable so that we're living a godly life. And whenever I would get this feeling of, hey, this feels like it's disrespectful to me, or this is uncomfortable, or this is taking too much from me, I would be taught like I was overreacting or being selfish or a brat or causing problems on purpose. The teenager, my appearance was controlled. So I went through this phase of goth fashion, very brief phase that I had my parachute pants and my little ball bearing necklace, and I dyed my hair red, um, like bright red, and I was punished for that. Um, and it was physical punishment. And there was just so much focus on what would people think if they saw me with dyed hair or if I looked different. And there was so much judgment and control. And it wasn't just outward appearances, it was also for thoughts. So I used to write in journals all the time because there were things I couldn't say out loud. I just needed to get my feelings out as a little kid. And so one of the adults in my home would frequently read my journals and would punish me for what I would write. And sometimes would even write back in my journal about what I was doing wrong or why they were right and how I needed to, what I needed to do to live a more godly life. And so even in my private thoughts that I tried to hide again and again, they would keep having to edit those. So not even in my mind was I safe from scrutiny.
Wow. Holy shit. Like that's just
Yeah.
a lot of pressure and just I don't know. You just can't find safety. My nervous system listening to you is just like I mean living it to a different maybe not to this extreme, but being in it in different ways. I know that feeling of just feeling so scared and helpless, alone, and you don't even realize it.
Yeah. And because you think that it's normal. And meanwhile, like you think that everybody feels like a stranger to themselves. Think that it's normal for your body to feel like a stranger's house where you don't know where anything is or if you can touch anything or where things belong. You just feel like
Yeah.
afraid to even think about who you are. And I guess that's kind of a thought stopping technique, like Steve Hassan
Mhm.
talks about, like these methods for shutting down any kind of dissonance. And I think maybe that was part of it.
Yeah. Wow. That analogy just really sticks out to me because I know, like, especially growing up, if I went to a friend's house for the first time, right, you feel pretty uncomfortable and you don't know where like the glasses are or, the bathroom is. And it takes a little while, but to feel like that all the time is so like such a perfect analogy where I think, at least for me, I don't think I'm really truly feeling at home in my body until the last year or so. Growing up in high control environments, you self abandon and you internalize all of the shame and try to be perfect just to feel loved, safe. You don't even realize it.
Ugh. Wow. It's just spot on. I got goosebumps when you phrased it. Your body feels like a stranger's house, because that's just, yeah, so accurate. But I'm also curious, has your family stayed the same with their relationship to religion since your childhood? Have their views changed at all? I'm just curious if with time, how have things changed?
Yeah, I mean, things have definitely gotten more extreme. It started out the way that I described, like with my dad and his wife. And then after my dad passed, and then I went to live with my aunt and uncle, our home life was actually a lot less strict as far as having privacy to write in my journals or go and spend time with friends. Or so, in some ways, I felt almost it was like a rescue. And so I was very grateful for it. In other ways, though, things got more and more extreme. After we moved to Florida and my family got involved with a church here in Tampa, that's when things kind of started to take a turn. And the church in question is actually considered a cult. And I know cult is a very strong word. It can be very divisive. So I want to be cautious in using that term, but it's definitely a high control system. And the pastor, Rodney Howard Brown, is known as a conspiracy theorist. So things got really extreme from that point on.
Yeah. Wow. Around what age was this for you?
This was right when I was going to college. So we moved to Florida when I was 16. And then we went to different Church of God or Pentecostal affiliated denomination churches for a while. And then we started going to the River, that's the church of Tampa. And I remember feeling uncomfortable there. Um, I remember like they have this phenomena of holy laughter, which isn't actually biblical. And a lot of very conservative Christian sources also believe that the River in Tampa is a cult and is engaging in non-biblical practices. So it's not just me saying that. I have an article where I've sourced everything, and it's writers who typically I would never source because they are so conservative, and even they are kind of like, yikes, um, they've run literal pyramid schemes from the church. He sells a $500 gilded Bible on his website. My family bought a whole bunch of this health tonic called Mona V from him that tasted really bad. And it was part of a pyramid scheme that they were trying to sell, and we just could not get people to buy it. So,
Because I think I do see in my own research talking about this COVID conspiracy around deep denial and just a lot that associates in general, not just him, with maybe more very right wing. It's not at all. So we won't go down that rabbit hole. Do their research at home on this topic. But I guess pivoting a little bit, is the question I think a lot of us are so curious about. Why do you feel like you were able to break free from these, high control systems, whether it was your family and in this religious system?
I think this is going to sound really messed up, but I think it was because I felt like an outcast that I was able to question these systems
Mhm.
that my family was part of. I think that if I had felt like I belonged and I had felt comfortable in those systems, I wouldn't have questioned them. But like things like being told that I was cursed with a generational curse and there was something inherently wrong with me, that kind of helped me with holding that Christian nationalist identity parallel to my own instead of fully intertwining with it. I think so. I think that's a big part of it. And then also, I think really like with deconstructing my faith, and deconstruction doesn't mean like throwing it all away or abandoning the faith. It just means like taking it apart and really examining it, and seeing what really does hold true. And so when my dad died in a work accident, that was really this pivotal point because I believed with my whole heart that he was going to be healed. We believed in miraculous healing. So we believed that if you laid your hands on someone and prayed for them, no matter what illness they had, that they would get better. And so at the hospital, my dad in the work accident, he had a TBI. So obviously prayer is not going to heal a closed head injury. But I was 13 and I was so convinced that, you know, God God can do anything. So this must be the purpose. This must be the reason. If I just believe enough, it just takes enough faith. And we prayed for hours and then they pulled the plug.
Oh my gosh.
I am so, so sorry.
Like, yeah, like just picturing 13-year-old you, and I can't, yeah, like, how do you wrap your mind around that? I guess, like, just like, but like, you're literally in a hospital and stuff, and it's just like they're just so focused on praying. And then what happened after?
So we when we got to the hospital, sorry,
You need to take a minute. Please do.
when we got to the hospital, they told us, after they had told us that he wasn't gonna wake up, I had gotten saved that summer at church camp. I had my teen study Bible with me. I brought my little bottle of anointing oil because we believed in like anointing with oil for prayer. My cross necklace and anointed his head with oil as if that was going to heal the head wound. You know, we prayed, but I remember saying, like, I believe God's going to heal him. And they just kind of shook their heads. And I could not understand why. They were just like, oh, no, like, like they didn't believe. And I remember feeling so angry because I thought they don't believe this and I do, and they need to believe so that, but it's okay because I have enough faith and I know that God's going to heal him. So it was that on the car ride home after after he passed, I just remember thinking, what did I do wrong? And the next day, we had a minister in our family who was talking with the family. We all gathered at my grandma's house because what do you do? This our family, that's a relative who's a minister, said, there must just be something in faith that we lack. And I was like, I had never believed in anything more. And if that still wasn't enough, how can I ever help anybody? How will believing in anything change anything? And so that was when I started really questioning. But then I kept gaslighting myself and going back and forth for years saying, no, I'm wrong, or it's the generational curse that they say that is on me from my mother, or all of these things going back and forth to the point that I even went to religious universities. I went to Southeastern University and I went to Liberty University for my master's. And so even then, I think the deconstruction began, but I fought tooth and nail to hold on to what I had been taught.
Like, because what else? What else are you left with, really? Like, but I'm just so sorry. That level of just gaslighting, and your entire world comes crashing in internally and externally. But I'm just so sorry.
My heart just breaks for you. And it just feels so fair when, you lost someone so important to you and then you question if you did something wrong. That's just, oh,
Yeah. I'm curious. Well, one, want to do a check-in of how are you doing right now after unpacking, telling us all of that.
I I'm baking, and it's something that, like I'm okay. I know that, like, I mean, it was so long ago and I've been through therapy. It's just talking about it. It's something that I don't typically talk about a lot in my day-to-day life. And so going back to it, it's like and I know this might sound like trite but my nervous system like remembers. You get that your body responds to what your brain is giving it. And when I get those memories, I get, this physiological like reaction. So I'm shaky, but I am okay. Thank you for checking in.
Yeah.
I know, like, the listeners listening, this is so incredibly vulnerable. So please, I hate the phrase hold space, but that's all I can say right now is just hold space, please. And all my followers that have been so gracious, hope and guarantee will do the same for Nikki, because this is a lot. This is so vulnerable, and it's, the body keeps the score per se. I hate that phrase as well, but it lives in your bones to a cellular level. And I think, especially, I can't imagine, right, like undoing, your whole worldview. But then also, I think once we start doing this, it comes down to once we deconstruct a lot of these things, it all kind of unravels like an onion, and then it's family, and then it's relationships or job, or, seeing things so differently. So I guess I'm curious if you want to keep going. We don't have to, but go this route. But it touching on a little bit of, I guess, estrangement. When at what point with the family system, though? It sounds like later into more of your adulthood life, hand in hand, religion and this family, everything going on. When did that kind of all unravel? I guess officially for you, or say a little bit more if you're comfortable.
Yeah, no, I can talk about it. I think just because the system that my family was part of, it kept harming me. And I'm not saying that they were intentionally doing it. I don't think that like my family was out to hurt me, and I don't think that the church was out to hurt me. I think that it was a long-standing system that people have been like part of for all of their life, and then you know, their parents were part of it and their parents were part of it. And so as long as they were benefiting from it, I could see why they wouldn't question it. But because it was harm that I kept experiencing, um, it led me to wonder. And of course, like I think being autistic also led me to being able to disentangle myself. I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my 30s, but not picking up on those social cues and not understanding why I wasn't supposed to question authority or like feeling consistently misunderstood, I think that that helped make me aware of how these systems benefited a few but could be harmful to so many.
I think we've said it perfectly. I think we're so blind to what we're in and the people that are in it. It just that's shapes our worldview and our beliefs, and it overrides, I think, a lot. And I think the whole other topic we could go down and another episode is just the misogyny too in it of it all. That's a lot to, I think, unpack and deconstruct there in a piece of this. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a heavy correlation between women, female survivors, non binary folk, just because our worldview is inherently different than the patriarchal, misogynistic, white supremacist lens that everything's built upon.
And we're often in these systems, we're often the black sheep of the family, but also the black sheep of the system where we call out these patterns of dysfunction and we're the ones saying it's harmful because, yeah, we're different, but everybody's different and it can be harmful to everyone someday. It's kind of like in the disabled community. The disabled community is a community that anybody can join at any time, possibly, when you think about it. And so I guess, being aware of like how if it can affect one person, it could affect anyone.
So, yeah, the us them mentality, totally. I think that's an inherent piece of the structure of our society. Of you don't fit in this one way of being and grinding the 40 plus hours a week and stuff your feelings down and just work harder and just be okay, and you look able bodied and you should be straight and you should be perfect and have a thin body and all these things in this perfect cookie cutter way. Yeah, like inherently too, it's like, okay, if you're none of those, there's a ton of shame. If you, yeah, stray from the family's image or think or say or do something that's without a bounds, there's just so much fear. You're going to get cut off. You're going to be harmed. You're going to be mocked. None of us want to feel that. And ultimately, I think where we're heading with this conversation right now is like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, black or white, estrangement or connection. There's just no way of being in this society, not just within families, but I think there's no ability to tolerate difference or just difference in lived experience, we're going to go nowhere.
Exactly. I think if, we're taught in these religious systems from this young age that these other people that aren't like us are somehow dangerous. We're implanted with this fear or to perceive other people as a threat, either as a threat to our physical safety or a threat to our spiritual well-being or as a threat to our jobs or finances. And there's so much of that division that is created by giving us fear because fear is what controls us. Fear is what keeps us in the system.
Mhm.
And I think a big part of it is, I got to the point where I'm like, well, I've been afraid my whole life and I'm always going to be afraid. The fear's not going to go away. So I might as well just do what I need to do regardless, I guess. And that's probably not like a healthy way of approaching it.
Well, I think, Vanessa, it will sound so cliche and I might butcher this quote, but it's like, there's nothing to fear but fear in of itself, whatever. Yeah, I think that's like
Yeah.
Theodore Roosevelt or something, and maybe I'm misquoting it right now. But I, in the last year, have really believed that, though, in the way of like the only thing, the ultimate goal here in the society is to control others, dominate others, feel empowered through such destructive, cruel ways. But they can only control you if you feel fear and shame. And if they can't shame you, because that's ultimately our nervous system, we feel fear, that tells us that's an attachment threat. We are going to die. So shame is there in a way to kind of protect us in an ass backwards way. But, we're so fearful of disconnection and judgment and shame and being punished that once you kind of say, fuck the fear, I'm going to be fearful either way, but I can empower myself and move through the fear to get through the other side of it, then we can't be controlled.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of deconstruction is having to face that fear of like asking these hard questions that you're afraid there might not be anything on the other side. And as somebody who has deconstructed, but still like, and I know this is going to sound cheesy, corny, whatever. I can say I still love Jesus more so now than I did before deconstruction. I look back over his life and I'm not talking about like white Jesus. I'm talking about like table flipping Jesus. Like that's like my whole vibe. um and so, like really looking into character and his teachings. And I can say that by American standards, I wouldn't be considered a Christian.
Mhm.
But when you deconstruct, I think you're afraid that you're going to lose yourself and you're going to lose your faith. But if you can find that trust, I think you'll find for Christians that are afraid to examine these systems, I think you'll find that no matter how you change, Jesus will find you on that path again and again, and he will recognize you every time.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
don't think that sounds easy at all. I think I'm just happy that, it's kind of like you've been able to define your relationship with Jesus on your own terms. And yeah, I think that's just so awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, and seeing through the whitewashed, you know, colonial American Christian nationalist version of Jesus down to like what's not like really what's what is the truth here, and what are we trying to manipulate for these systems, right, for control. So I'm there with you. And I said before, maybe say 15 years ago ish by now, 10, 15, I was screaming, like, I'm atheist. There's no God out there that would cause all of this pain and suffering, to my poor, at the time, Mennonite boyfriend. And his family did not outcast me like my family ex in laws did for getting an order of protection. Anywho, I think, like, all religion isn't inherently bad. And I think right now at this point, I can definitely say, you know, I am more spiritual and aligned more with, right, like table flipping Jesus right now, as well in my spiritual awakening path, compared to me being a very resentful teen 10, 12 years ago that, probably did not great things. Was not a great time in my life. And I apologize to those that are listening, possibly from my ex's family. Thank you for your kindness and compassion, because that was very offensive, right? So I think, yeah, there's just beauty in this all, and there's so much gray area here for all of us to learn and do the deep down dives, healing work, awareness work, deconstruction. We're all in a way, America is one big pyramid scheme, it feels like, here, and we're using these churches for control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do feel like it's this, like you said, a pyramid scheme. And it's this, I think the smaller systems like family and business, essentially those seven mountains, they all have accumulated under this umbrella that is becoming this weird church state hybrid that we're seeing form. And it's it's alarming, but I do think that if enough people are like mindful and they do the work of deconstructing these systems, and they do the work of, questioning themselves and seeing how they have played into, likely unintentionally played into the support of these systems that gives them power, we can take that power back.
Right. Right. Yep, absolutely. I think that's the only way we can change right now what's going on in the political parties, and the racism, the homophobia, misogyny, violence, you name it. I think it comes down to, I think there's obviously violent people in this country, clearly, but, previously, as Diana and I covered, I won't say, right, like everyone in MAGA is all good or all bad, all evil. It's so much more nuanced. And I think it comes down to like your story here too. Like ultimately, our psychology often overrides us into choosing family or tribe over, I mean, honestly, the bigger, greater good. Their tribal mind kicks in. And if I am at threat for getting kicked out for voting otherwise or saying otherwise, like for me with Black Lives Matter, the fear of like, oh God, if I come out and I'm too liberal, what's going to happen? In that moment, I said, fuck the fear. And my worst fears were confirmed. I'm going to get kicked out from my family. It's so nuanced. I don't know. Like at that point, yeah, we need to sit down and have deeper discussions about how this is all playing out to make a longer standing change.
Absolutely. And I know I don't want to like repeat too much of our old podcasts, and you might be able to explain this better, Brooke, but what really helped me even getting out of my marriage was you telling me just how it's like there's this biological, like instinctual need for that community. And when you go against that, it it can like literally feel like you're dying sometimes. It takes every fiber of your being to separate yourself from, your family or your tribe, even when they are so unhealthy. I just want to acknowledge that, yeah, it can just be really, really tough.
Mm.
But I guess speaking about politics and stuff, this is a good segue into my next question. No shame at all with this question. I want to preface with that. Um, but like to tie into our current political and kind of the moral like crisis that's kind of going on in the world, I'm just really curious if you ever voted MAGA.
No, I've never voted MAGA. Um, I I was really concerned when when JD started talking about how Trump was the next Hitler. I was like, oh, finally, there's someone who agrees in my family. And I thought that he would kind of be the bridge between me and the rest of the family, because like they respected him. He went, he went to Yale. And so like he was more like respected by my family. And so I thought that when he said like, hey, Trump is a problem, this is a huge concern, I thought, oh, finally, like there might be a way to actually communicate or find some common ground. And then when he started going on all of these podcasts and talking about, his childless cat lady comments, which I'm the only childless cat lady that I know in our family. He's and started saying things about, women and their role in society and doing thought experiments about household votes. And, that's when I was like, whoa, what is going on? And that panic set in. But no, I never voted for Trump. I've, I've always been terrified of it. And I think it's because it was so connected with my trauma that I had experienced at the hands of those systems.
Thank you for answering. I appreciate candidness there. 'Cause I know it's a hot button topic right now. And once you undo the trauma and deconstruct and see it, I'm right there with you. Then you're like, oh no, I don't know how you could vote. Unfortunately, but when you're in it, and for various levels, I can understand how some people, because of privilege, whiteness, safety, don't see it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, even though it's pretty obvious. But we won't go down that rabbit hole because I know you both. I know what I'm talking about.
I know, Brooke, you and I had spoken previously about it. I didn't know that you
Uh,
had voted MAGA. And so I kind of like overshared in that first time that we talked. I like kind of, it was just sort of like word vomit. And like, because I was like so excited, like, oh my gosh, somebody like that understands and wants to talk. And then like, I think it was like a couple days later, I saw you post about voting MAGA in the past, and I immediately had this very visceral, physical response because I have IBS, and
no.
it was so I got sick
Oh no.
because I panicked and my nervous system just was like, oh no, you've overshared with an unsafe
Uh,
person. Because the schema that I had in my mind,
yeah.
automatically connected MAGA and unsafe. And, and so I had to kind of, regulate myself and kind of think critically through it and reading your story and understanding like you were in the middle of a cult dynamic, you were not safe, and you were not permitted, just like when I was younger, not permitted to even like have thoughts of my own that weren't like dissected and criticized in my private little journals. Like you didn't have that freedom to really examine what you were in the middle of. And so like, and I think I need to like hold that,
Mhm.
not just for you, but for my family and for those who have voted MAGA in the past and are starting to question and wanting to leave that mindset because they're starting to become aware of it.
Mhm. Well, one, thank you so much for holding so much space and grace and honestly your vulnerability. And us previously talking about it, I, yeah, just one, so much respect and gratitude. And uh, this will sound a bit superficial. I chose it in a way for social media, but not, hoping that as vulnerable. And I want to say the first time I talked about it a couple of times, I was scared shitless and wanted to throw it myself. Because it's been a piece of me that I've like tucked far, far away and so shamey. And it is embarrassing to admit, I'm not gonna lie. Um, and but I think I made that choice because I felt like it was key to begin to illustrate, everything we're talking about. And I'm so grateful that you can empathize and see it. I think it takes a lot of deeper regulation, as you can tell, awareness, your own self awareness, to get to that place of understanding and empathy, broadly, or sympathy, however you want to say it. Um, because it's kind of what we need right now as a collective society, I think, to understand that there's so many layers to this. I don't try to say it to defend myself and be the victim either, because I get attacked at that online, which I have my nervous system and can tolerate it, to be honest, because I think it's a reflection of where people are at if they get extremely irate and defensive. And from one sentence, and a random content creator can say, I did vote MAGA in 2016, and here's why. And if people shut me down and say, I don't want to listen to you, let's burn her at the stake. Okay. Like that is the problem with our society, because people can change, learn, and grow. And we are in a cult society, literally. Like, we shouldn't, it is surprising, but shouldn't be surprised at how many people are, why MAGA's MAGA. It's a cult, right? And I, again, thank you for the grace. And I was, 20 at the time, 21, and just, yeah, living in survival mode. And like you said, like, when you're programmed to live in this fear, and like at 21, if I were talking to that past self right now, she'd have no idea that she was living under fear. She was trying to be perfect, and was so scared of this disconnection and trauma that would later come down the line. It's, we bury this stuff so unconsciously, and if we only live in one reality, right? Like, I live in a small town, went to a small college, all red. It takes a lot to deconstruct for people. And I get my whiteness, my privilege. That's a huge piece of it, and I own that, and have done a lot. I'm not trying to sound like the white martyr savior woman here either now. Instantly voting, and then going to grad school, coming to a blue city, growing and experiencing life outside of the protected bubble of college was what really opened my eyes almost immediately after that election, and really detaching from my family there with a new boyfriend and a new life. I have a lot of gratitude for that period of my life, even though it was the start of my abusive marriage. It did help me to detach from those very harmful ideologies, and, also share, because growing up in a very small conservative town, again, people check out our previous podcast episode unpacking a little bit more of this. I don't think everyone there is violently racist, or some I would say aren't at all, but they're scared shitless maybe to say, I would vote more liberal or blue because of fear of being outcasted, lack of resources, lack of diversity, lack of education too. Like, anyways, it all intersects. So, but long story short, thank you. I'm sorry if, causing that gastrointestinal distress. I understand that trauma response, and I apologize to anyone else listening if that caused you to be, violently upset and nervous and panicked. And, I'm not trying to do one big exposure therapy and cause distress for people. But I think I just wanted to highlight it, or at least be another vulnerable person to say, this is my lived experience. And if other people in MAGA can see that and understand it and say, like, I understand, it doesn't excuse egregious violent behavior. No, but if we want as a society again to unpack all of this bullshit, I at least can help start that conversation. So, anyways, I went on a little tirade there. So thank you. Thank you, Nikki. Do you, I guess, any other points, Nikki or Diana, before, I want to lead us to kind of wrapping up and talking about some of Nikki's amazing work. But yeah, either of you two got other final thoughts here.
With what you were saying about, like people like responding negatively to you for like finding out that you had voted MAGA in the past, I think with me, even though I've never voted MAGA, I think there's a chance that people still might see me as a threat, or might have some kind of, I mean, I'm not a very threatening person, but like still might, associate me with that because of just family proximity.
Yeah.
Like, I can understand, like, there have been people that I've reached out to say, like, hey, um, would you be interested in, helping me tell my story? And, I never heard back. They would talk to me a little bit, and then I would never hear back. And I think this may not be the reason, but I think that if there is that fear, or that, like, oh, I don't really want to associate with this person because they are part of that family, like I would understand. I just want to strive to, keep pulling back the layers of the things that I have been steeped in, like even though I don't have like racist thoughts or sexist thoughts or anything, I benefited from those systems growing up. The work that I do in my life moving forward, I hope that it's always reflecting like a dedication to undoing those systems and being anti-racist. I wouldn't fault anybody for, you know, seeing who I'm related to and being like, oh, yikes, maybe I wouldn't want to talk to her. So I appreciate you guys giving me space to tell my story and being so understanding about it.
Of course, of course. And I guess I would say something on a very similar thread, but also I think this is more for social media folks directly in the keyboard warriors and comment section that might be more left leaning. Just the moral superiority complex here, though, does need to chill a little bit. Like, again, like you said, Nikki, everyone has their own individual autonomy to associate with who they want to associate. And we all are humans. We cannot help our biases and also don't want to, reinforce trauma or cause people to get traumatized here. So everyone takes space, but I just think, on the left end of the spectrum, if people aren't perfectly in the cookie cutter of being the most, social justice warrior, and people aren't, saying things correctly or have the lived experience that you would like, I just say respect, please. Please don't send death threats to people coming out of MAGA, because again, it's not gonna fighting fire with fire or shame with shame isn't gonna get us anywhere. I don't put up with racist, violent rhetoric or crappy comments or crappy people, right? But the nuances here. And again, I understand too, if like, I lost a lot of followers actually by posting that MAGA stuff. And I get it. I understand maybe why, but I think, yeah, they want us to be so divided and so black and white just to keep fueling this system of hate.
Absolutely. And I think, like finding a group, finding like a grassroots movement. Um, I'm not going to name any specifically here just because it's better that they're not advertised so they're not like targeted, but basically these movements that are, geared toward the common goal of eliminating fascism, um, and dismantling these authoritarian systems that we're seeing in our government and in our society. There are going to be people from all walks of life that still have that goal. And it's kind of like well, if you're, not against us, you're for us, like we will take, you know, any help that can be offered. And just like I am extremely left leaning. Like people are like, are you a socialist? And I'm like, maybe a little further left than that, I don't know. But and so I'm in some volunteer groups with some folks who are more like centrist. And so I'll say something and they're like, Nikki, respectfully, yikes. And but like they're we're all collaborating together, even though there are these still pretty large differences. We still have this common goal, and so I think it's important to have that spirit of collaboration for us to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. One thing I wanted to say was it can be really hard to do, but one thing I've found that helps with opening dialogue is just being curious, about other people's backgrounds, or why they might think a certain way, before you see some rage bait online and get mad and want to like type up something. I know I can be guilty of that too, just taking a breath and taking a moment and like just asking and being curious so we can kind of better understand each other. I know I'm probably sounding a bit like a kumbaya hippie here, but I just think that's so important too, to to open a dialogue and like you said, Nikki, collaborating with one another.
I agree. Yeah, I think especially online, no, we're not going to be solving anything in the Instagram or TikTok comment section with anyone. I just reflect and just say, like, if I'm going to respond to this comment or post a, rage, comment to rage bait or whatever, like, the only thing I'm going to be doing is just harming more of my nervous system. And I might ruminate on this for a few hours. And, where is this really going to get us besides fueling more hatred towards each other? I think these deeper conversations need to be had in person in different platforms, spaces, groups, right? Like you said, Nikki, collaborative. In it, ultimately, no matter what, I think my view on the political spectrum, a lot of this crap isn't even freaking politics or should be, like it comes down to humanity and human rights. Like it shouldn't be up for debate at all. So yeah. But all right. I guess in the final few moments here in this podcast, I keep joking, but honestly very serious with Nikki of hey, do you want to be our third wheel here? We could talk for days. We have oodles of other episode topics that we could totally dive into here, but really want to just ultimately go back to estrangement isn't an easy topic. Ultimately, because of politics in the world we live in, this is huge. We are all wired biologically, emotionally to want to be with our families. And that's what it is. We just want to feel safe. We want to feel loved. We want to feel accepted. But there's only a certain amount of, intolerance, abuse, harm, neglect, that we can take as humans across the board. And, I said enough is enough. And I really want to share with the listeners that Nikki has a beautiful Substack, and she released a fabulous article last night, really going in depth, outlining this and how there's so many levels to this and how to deal with it and her journey more in depth. And just want to thank her for her vulnerability too in there. I will link that in our show notes. And also want to highlight that Nikki literally last night, oh my gosh, her ebook, her poetry ebook came out right on time. We were talking about how she's releasing her first poetry book soon, and which was kind of like it's not ready yet because we wanted to have like it be live for her to for you to purchase if you're interested, to check out her gorgeous work. She's a magician with her words. Let me tell you, in case you haven't already could tell in this podcast how well spoken she is and the metaphor she uses. So I will link her ebook too in the show notes and on social media. But the physical paperback book will be released to be determined very soon in the near future. And I will also be featuring that on my social media, newsletter, podcast in the future once we get the official confirmation it's live and for sale. But for now, you can grab her ebook. And I did that immediately last night when she sent me the link. So yay, perfect divine timing that it comes out right now. So I do want to ask Nikki, I did selfishly say, hey, if you come on the podcast, I want to hear a poem. Like, you're amazing. I saw some on your social media and want, talk up your book a little bit, Nikki. And yeah, if you're still up for it, yeah. Can you share?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, the title of the book is Buried Before Winter, and it's available on bookshop.org. I went through Ingram Spark for publishing because I didn't want to use Amazon because Bezos sucks. And basically, the whole collection is it's very personal, and it's essentially my journey of healing and processing trauma. And it's poetry that I've written, even years ago that I've been too afraid to share with anyone. And putting it all out there in this like crazy act of like cathartic vulnerability. Kind of the gist of it. The poem that I have today to share, I think it ties in with estrangement because it relates to the concept of being estranged from ourselves. And I think a lot of us in these systems, we have that disconnect from our true identity in favor of I don't really want to use the term cult identity, but the identity that is associated or built by the religious system or family system. And so we kind of put ourselves on hold. And sometimes we also have to do that in our families that aren't healthy until things become healthy for us to go back to. And so it's related to either being estranged from those we love or estranged from ourselves. Should I start reading it now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm like, I'm silently sitting here being like with my popcorn, like, oh, I can't wait. So like eloquently spoken. And I just know for me in my bones, I'm feeling it right now, and the energy, like it's gonna hit. So thank you. Please, if you are ready, I'm all yours, and I believe Diana is too.
Yes, I am on the edge of my seat.
I've never shared this with anyone except my partner before. So
Oh my gosh, what an honor.
Yes.
this is my first time reading it aloud to anyone else.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Okay. Buried before winter. There is a version of you that you were not permitted to have in the house. Like a wild animal that you hugged and cried over while your mother screamed in horror and grabbed the broom to chase it out. In between chores, you watched out the window to see if it would come back. Maybe you convinced yourself it wasn't really practical to keep. Good Lord, he's digging up my garden beds. Maybe some parts gave everyone a fright. I think they only hiss like that when provoked. And this beast of you, who you loved, disappeared somewhere between the back porch and the first snow. There's no way it would survive. You check the snow for footprints every day. Winter was the silence of an orchestra with blank white sheet music on every stand. But the rustle of pages turning, the rustle of things coming alive is calling you to remember. The wild in you was buried before winter, in a burrow of fermenting berries and spiced leaves, waking only to roll over and take another bite before sinking back into drowsy stupor. The players of spring are tuning up, the string pluck plinks of icicle drips melting and crocus sprouts drumming up through the frosted soil are sounding the alarm. You are the mother of your house now, and your creature will amble back through sopping chilled mud, fur matted, hungover from hibernation wine, and it wants to be held.
Wow.
I'm oof. I'm in tears right now.
Yeah, me too. I am shaking.
My inner child, and yep. Ah, that's just, yeah, there it is. Like the art of reclaiming yourself, your voice through creativity. It's exactly what it felt like from childhood to be felt like you cannot be seen, and you have to not just hide, but you're this beast. Mm. Ah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being so authentic and vulnerable and freaking badass, let me tell you. Like, you,
Yes.
you are.
Thank you so much. You guys have been so nice.
Oh, oh my goodness. And also, I hope you have an audiobook of this poetry, just because your voice is just so soothing with it. And yeah, it just lands.
I haven't really thought of that. Maybe I should.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in agreement with Brooke there. Like I could just feel my nervous system, like it was very emotional to listen to, but my nervous system was just like, just listening to you read.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, all right, listeners. That is it for today. I hope, might have Nikki back for future episodes soon to unpack more. But appreciate everyone listening and holding space, and just know that, we're all human. And my motto here, and I think Nikki's is, Diana's has been, our medicine, I think, is just being human with one another and being open. And you don't got to go trauma dump online. You don't have to, but yeah, it's one really profound way to reclaim, I think, your identity and narrative, and shape new identities, narratives. So again, thank you to Nikki. All of her information will be in the show notes. Please check out all of her goodies. Support her. She's an amazing creator and artist, as you can see, poet. So please, everyone, also like, share, subscribe, comment for Burning the Couch with Brooke and Diana. And we will see you in the new year for our next episode. And thank you so much. Again, thank you, Nikki.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you, Nikki.
All right.